Berserk is one of those rare things that has you lingering on it for days after finishing it. I remember the first time I sat through the show. It haunted me for weeks after finishing that last devastating, albeit confusing episode. There's so much to say about the series, and there's no way I'm going to do it justice unless I talk about every single episode, and I just don't have the time. Berserk is considered anime, or Japanese animation for those who don't know. There's so much to say about the art form itself, and again, so little time. There's simply too much out there to cover. The one thing I will say is, I don't feel anime will ever truly become mainstream. Why? For the same reason an anime DVD is ridiculously overpriced, and yet fans keep flocking to collect as much as they can. A lot of it has to do with the culture itself. Even though a lot of anime is changed or played with to conform to US standards, there's still a ton of Japanese culture that not everyone might come to grasp. Also, we're still that nation that believes cartoons are mainly a child-friendly medium. What was the last adult animated film that came out from a major Hollywood studio? It's all ogres, talking donkeys, and cute little animals. If there's a talking animal in an anime movie, chances are they're biting someone's face off. That's why so many people gravitate to anime. It's for people who love animation, but can also get a great story and some mature subject matter. There are some shows out there like Ghost in the Shell that I just can't wrap my head around. It's so confusing and yet so much more sophisticated than anything we have over here. Every time we've tried to put something out like that, I feel it's mostly done for shock value. It's usually style over substance, and even the most die-hard animation nuts crave good storytelling. So that's the end of my soapbox. This is a review of the first Berserk film based on the anime series and marking the beginning of a trilogy. We're seeing a lot of trilogies lately, aren't we? Peter Jackson's The Hobbit, not to mention Disney's upcoming Star Wars sequels. Now before I can talk about the movie, I'd have to talk about the series, so I'll try to be brief. The Berserk anime was actually based off of an adult comic strip that was created by Kentaro Miura. It started in the late 80s and, believe it or not, is still being published to this day. Throughout the comics, there are several story arcs detailing the path of the central character, Gatsu, as he roams the Midlands fighting off demons. The anime takes place during one story arc, although a lengthy one, called the Golden Age arc. This whole story is one big flashback that details how Guts became the one-eyed Black Swordsman and why he's on his endless quest. Berserk is set in a medieval European Middle-earth type setting and starts off during a 100-year war being forged between the Tudor Empire and the Midlands. The central character is Guts, a rogue swordsman who captures the attention of a band of mercenaries after killing the undefeated warrior Bazuso. These mercenaries, the Band of the Hawk, is led by a charismatic soldier named Griffith, whose compassions and dreams are the driving force behind the story. Griffith is impressed by Guts' abilities and challenges him to a duel where he gambles for Guts' services.
I rather enjoy settling things by force.
At first, Guts gets the best of him, but eventually Griffith wins, and Guts becomes a member of the Hawk.
And so, now you belong to me, Guts.
3 years pass, and with the help of Guts' legendary fighting style and enormous sword, the Hawks gain status throughout the Midlands, as well as the King's favor. Eventually, they become knights and continue to win seemingly hopeless battles despite the odds. The turning point of the story is where Griffith attempts to win the heart of Princess Charlotte. After an assassination, one that goes awry, Guts looks for Griffith when he hears a distinctly mesmerizing monologue between Griffith and the princess.
For me to call a man my friend, he must be equal to me in all respects.
From this point on, Guts decides that he wants his own reason for living, and commits himself to leaving the Hawk after he helps them reach their goal.
Guts, you're not thinking of... Are you thinking of leaving the Hawks?
That goal? Griffith wants to have his own kingdom. Most of the series were wondering how he plans to achieve all this, and after every episode, he gets closer and closer. It's astonishing to see it all unfold. Of course, there are the nobles who conspire against Griffith. They try several assassination attempts, but each time Griffith's cunning skill, and dumb luck, has him prevailing over the enemy. There's also the relationship between Guts and the Hawk's female commander, Casca. From the first day they meet, Casca can't stand Guts because of his reckless fighting style, his indifference in the heat of battle, and his constant knack for getting Griffith in danger.
Leave him alone. It's your fault. You put Griffith in danger. You almost got him killed. It's because of you!
There's a backstory in which we discover that Griffith gave Casca the chance to save herself from a corrupt nobleman.
If you have something to protect, then take up the sword.
And from that day on, she devoted herself to Griffith's cause. There's an underlying love triangle between Casca, Griffith, and the princess. While Casca hopes to become the sheath for Griffith's sword, she realizes that the only one Griffith is interested in is the princess, who is his only chance for fulfilling his dream. Throughout the series, Guts and Casca get closer, but their relationship is always on the rocks, and when they finally share their feelings for each other, they've already gone through hell and back.
My, how honorable. You're just like Griffith. Your dream is everything. You think of nothing but yourself. You don't give a damn whether I'm around or not, do you?
There are also the supporting characters that populate the Band of the Hawk. Most of them cheer Guts on as a hero, and toward the tail end of their journey, they make him realize that he actually has a purpose. The only one who has a beef with Guts is the thick-headed Corcus, who's always hated him for killing his comrades in the beginning, right after they tried to rob Guts blind. Even then, there isn't one character you don't end up caring for, and it makes the final chapter that much more devastating.
Now you sound like a goddamn woman!
At one point, Guts and Griffith encounter a giant demon called Zod the Immortal, who butchers most of Guts' soldiers and then beats Griffith senseless. Until the last few episodes, this is one of the few times we feel like this is a fantasy. After all, most of the series just deals with a war. This one episode with Zod foreshadows what the bulk of the Berserk storyline is supposed to be about, and perhaps why I've always had mixed emotions about the way the series ends. I won't talk about what happens, only that it's very grim and ends rather hopelessly. The pilot episode, which actually takes place sometime after the last episode, explains what became of Guts, but it's only one episode, and we completely forget about it, until the last episode. It's confusing, we don't see it coming, and because it ends on such a dark note, you get pissed off that they didn't continue the series after this point. Just imagine if they came out with The Empire Strikes Back and never made Return of the Jedi. The story does continue in the comic strip, but the graphic novels are kind of expensive, and there's no end in sight. I have most of them up to the mid-20s, and I kid you not, with the money I spent on them, I could have made 2 house payments and bought a mini-mall. Well, okay, not the mini-mall, but still, the price for these books is steep. So I guess this ended up being a review of the series after all. Now, the anime originally aired in Japan in 1998. It's been more than a decade, and finally in 2011, we got news that they were converting the Berserk comics into feature films. I was ecstatic. I'd finally get an animated adaptation chronicling the events after the show.
No response? Have your balls shrunk so hard they're caught in your throat? Come on, men! Show no mercy! Gouge out their eyes!
Well, not really. What they decided to do was essentially take the show and condense it into a movie trilogy. So this first film is more or less a remake. What am I talking about? It's the same story with the same voice acting. It is a remake. The movie, subtitled The Egg of the King, takes the first 9 episodes of the show and condenses it into about 78 minutes. That's just a little over an hour. That's a lot of slicing and trimming. They couldn't even make it 2 hours. You would think that the film version would be an unholy mess. Well, I'll be honest. Considering its short runtime, it's actually done really well. There are a ton of reviews out there covering the movie, most of them ranging from mixed to positive. The negative reviews pretty much state the obvious, that it condenses a lot of material into a really short movie. But when you look at what they decided to leave intact, they actually do a good job of staying faithful to the source material, both the show and the comics. Yes, obviously there were a lot of side stories and battles that were cut out completely. The main thing that was hurt by all the trimming were the relationships between the characters. They're still there as much as we need to make sense of it all, and someone new to Berserk could completely grasp the story, but I can't help but miss a lot of the material given how much of a fan of the series I am. Another thing to note, Berserk is very violent. It deals with war, slaughter, torture, rape, and Gothic religion. Mainly the first 4. The film is relentless with the gore. It's a cartoon, so it's easier to digest if you're one of those squeamish types, but man, they don't make too many gory cartoons nowadays. You've got people literally getting their faces split open. The animation is pretty good. They used a computerized, cel-shaded look that looks like traditional animation for the most part. The only parts that look computer-generated are some of the full-scale battle scenes, although some of the character facial animations are stiff.
You were all cowards!
It's pretty faithful to the look of the comic and the show, and feels a bit more polished, but all in all, nicely done. The music is epic. The score for the show is pretty good too, but parts of it felt generic. There was your dance theme, your battle theme, and of course the show's main theme, but the music for the film takes it to a new level. Just listen to it without the sound effects. That's epic. The English voice actors for the most part return for the film, which is great because a lot of times, English redubs get completely different casts for multiple runs. I think the only one who didn't return was the guy who did the voice for Corcus, and you can tell because the Corcus now isn't anywhere near the cynical wise-ass that the Corcus from the show was.
Too good for his crumbs, are you? Well, if wanting was enough to make something happen, we'd all be kings.
Shut up! Don't you know that serving as escorts for the fall hunt is an honor that is normally reserved for the most well-connected knights?
Guts and Casca pretty much sound like their old selves, but Griffith sounds a little more somber and less cheerful. He is read with a little more mystery, and at first it sounded like he had been replaced too.
I rather enjoy settling things by force.
Griffith!
A lot of anime fans prefer to watch with the original Japanese audio, but as much as I love the English dubs of the show, getting most of the original cast to return was a huge bonus. Overall, the film is a great introduction to what looks to be a very promising trilogy of animated films. I am admittedly disappointed that they chose to reboot the series as opposed to continue on, but for what it is, it's a faithful retelling, and if this review made you at all curious about the series, but you don't have 10 hours to spend playing catch-up, this will give you a pretty nice head start.